Well, I'm Diane Stacy, Assistant State Vet in Louisiana. My background is I grew up with horses, just pleasure horses, quarter horses. My sister was into hunt jump, and she had the thoroughbreds. But I just had backyard horses. My horses were my therapy growing up. I loved them. In private practice, I did a mixed practice, and it was just, you know, we did our EIA testing and microchipped them. It was no big deal to me. When I joined the department a couple of years back, it was a shock to me that every other state didn't require microchipping. I just thought everybody did it. And now that I've been with the department longer, it's crazy not to microchip. So with that said, I'm going to get into it. We have our EIA program like probably most states do. We started it in the 70s, and we made the major changes in 1994 under Dr. Mac Lee. And he's the gentleman that hired me, and he's kind of a mentor of mine that probably like every state, if we got a positive, we would go out as a state and confirm it. Well, we decided we needed to do something. This was actually the original basis for our program, was that we had to do something. If we were going to go out, pull blood, guarantee that this horse was indeed positive, we needed to make sure we had the right horse, because we didn't get out there instantly. Could they have switched the positive horse, the high-dollar horse? No horseman would ever do that, would they? So we wanted to be sure that we had the horse. So when the private vet would go out there and he tested a horse positive, his Coggins test, his EIA test, had the permanent ID. So when we would go out, verify the ID, pull the blood again, and we could tell if it came back positive. So the change in our program, you know, we have the positive test every year within 12 months of entry, within 12 months of an event, 6 months on change of ownership. But the major changes with permanent ID came in 1994. And I have to tell you right off the bat, we're a little bit busy in Louisiana, and I've got a few comments on that. So I stole from some of Dr. Lee's PowerPoints. So some of these are the original presentations he gave 100 years ago. So our law says that the animals tested every year have to have permanent ID. So they have to have a tattoo, a brand, and I think they said in the original wording, implanted electronic identification transponder with individual number. That means microchip. So anyway, where it says formally 507, all of our regulations right now are in flux. We're reviewing everything, and but this was the current verbiage. So we accept as permanent ID the tattoo, the brand, or the microchip. Now, these are some historic testing numbers in Louisiana, and again, one of the reasons that we had to get a handle on this is that back in the 90s, we had an inordinate amount of positives. So Dr. Lee said we have to start tackling this. We have to get rid of the positive cases. Since we instituted the microchipping, or the permanent ID, we haven't eradicated it, but we haven't had more than 10 cases a year in several years. And in fact, one of the highest years we had was 2 years ago, where one parish outside of Evangeline Downs decided they had to start gathering up the feral racehorses that were turned loose. So they hired somebody to go gather up the feral horses, and they didn't have tattoos. So they were turned loose. They didn't have any microchip. They didn't have any tattoos. Maybe they didn't work out and they just turned them loose. Well, of the 9 that were rounded up, 4 of them were positive for EIA. So the impetus to develop this program was we considered 373 positive cases in 1995 too much. And like I said, Dr. Lee started this, and I don't know if he consulted with other states. He just made the decision, this is what we're going to do, because we have to control EIA in our state. Okay, reasons, well, other programs require it. Like I said, written description wasn't good enough. We got too many bay horses. And like other people have said, oftentimes the vet doesn't put in the full description, so we just got tired that of getting just a brief description. Better traceability, and this is where I want to talk a little bit about the herpes incident going on in the fairgrounds. And it was said that you had a hard time tracing out all of the cases. Well, we're still addressing some of the barns. We have 7 out of 49 barns under quarantine. And the index barn, there were rumors that some horses disappeared. The horse became clinical on Christmas Day. I had people on the ground the next day, but during that time frame, did a horse disappear? We have 2 sworn statements from the trainer. Oh, no, that never happened. And we have eyewitness accounts privately from some of the riders and the other trainers that, oh, yeah, that happened. A horse left. Well, we've gone through and gotten a census from the stewards. We haven't gone in and done the lip and checked every single ID, but we have a census, and according to our census, that horse is in the barn, that it did not leave. But how nice it would be to go through and wand every one of those horses. I wasn't going to send my people in to check the ID on every one of those horses. We all know every time a regulatory person goes out and there's a new infection, it's our fault. So we went from what was provided to us by the stewards, that all horses were accounted for, except 8 that had left, 7 were in other barns, and they were put under isolation, and 1 that went to a training center, and we found it. But from all the other barns, we haven't even finished the census of what's been there. So anyway, better traceability, a deterrent. Deterrent and better identification of stolen horses. Now we have a permanent means of identification. So we have found with our brand, we are a brand state, that it has been a deterrent. Natural disaster. This has been the area where it's been a godsend. We have a few little disasters in Louisiana, flooding, hurricanes, etc. And yeah, in some cases, they just swim over the fences. The fences have been knocked down, or the owners just turn them loose. In the recent flooding we had in Baton Rouge in August, we had unprecedented flooding, 40 days, 40 nights of flooding. We thought God was taking revenge on Baton Rouge because we had, in some cases, 19 feet of water in areas that had never flooded. So in some cases, people turned the horses loose, and we found bodies subsequent, but in some cases we did rescue some horses. So if we didn't have a microchip or some means of permanent ID with all the disasters we've had, it would have been very difficult to reunify them. And I started working for the state not too long before Katrina, and I had decided I wanted to cut back a little bit. I had 2 kids. I'd worked the whole time. I put my husband through vet school. So I wanted to take it easy and not work so much. And then Katrina hit. So everything has changed. The whole working for the state 9 to 5 has changed. But anyway, the greatest use we've had for it has been in the case of theft and in the case of natural disasters. Okay, methods. People have been over them. The brands, the backyard people, that where we were finding most of the EIA, they aren't going to brand their horses, and often it's not individual. Lip tattoos. Well, the Jockey Club and the American Quarter Horse Association have those, but they can fade. They can be altered. So we actually embraced the microchips. We put out the rule. Every horse has to be tested every year, and you have to have permanent ID, was a subsequent change. So we actually embraced this, and this is the verbiage that came from the original text that I thought was funny. Embraced by horse owners and private vets for permanent individual ID. Oh no, they went kicking and screaming. They didn't want to use the permanent ID. Now, was it Big Brother back in the 90s? Not so much then, just the cost, why did we have to do this? But we as a department embraced the microchipping concept, and it had certain technological advances versus boxes stacked in a corner of Coggins tests that, you know, how are you going to trace boxes or even filing cabinets? At one point in time, we may have had a whole room full of stacks of Coggins tests with nothing, which we hadn't gotten around to handling yet. So the technological advances and the search function of our database have greatly enhanced it. And yes, we've gotten calls from Angela. Sometimes we have the chips in our database, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have 5 chips in our database on one single horse. But we did choose as a department to push the microchips. So how did we do this? Well, we started giving out microchips to the private veterinarians, and that won them over very quickly. All of a sudden, it wasn't an issue. Free chips, and I can charge $50 for it, so that went over well. We sold the readers to the veterinarians at a reduced cost. And then we had the chip-a-thons that I've heard. Wherever horses were congregated, we would start doing it at a reduced cost. So then, once the program started going, we established the database to record and search for the chips. So a lot of things. I am not an IT expert. And then, again, these are the original pictures of our readers that we had and the original chips that we had. We used the reusable little plungers, and we were giving out the sterile microchips. But these were the original readers that we used in our program back in the 90s. Now, our database, and it's kind of funny that I'm up here talking about databases because I am considered the expert in our EIA database because, as it was said, the guy who created our system has gone. And I've been told that if it breaks, there's nobody that knows how to deal with it. But when I asked our IT people about, just explain to me describe our database, I was told it's a basic document imaging system with sequential databases in-house. It's dated technology, and it's traditional sequential on the back end and ASP on the front end, which means active server pages. So that being said, we have a database where we scan in the Coggins test. And this was where I was saying at one point in time we had boxes stacked everywhere because it is fairly labor intensive. We had to, when we get them from the lab, we scan the individual test charts into the database, and if we happen to get the yellow or the pink color, it doesn't scan too well, so we need the original. And we usually have a dedicated person, but our dedicated person just got into vet school, so we're actually having to divide up amongst personnel to scan them in. And then once they're scanned in, we have some searchable data fields that somebody has to input the data, and we can actually access this in-house server anywhere in the state. So once we at the main office scan them in, any of our field personnel, if they have downtime, they are told to go into the in-house system and input the data. Because like I said, where these scanned images go, they go in the cloud. They go into our in-house cloud somewhere. But then you can input the data fields, and they're cataloged by the owner's name, the zip code, and the permanent ID. So we can search by any of those functions. And it does allow us to check the EIA history on that horse and any horse tested in Louisiana. If it's scanned properly, if it doesn't jam and doesn't pick up, and if it's been input correctly. And I just took some slides from our database, and these are medical records. So we've got the fine line between sharing them with just anybody who calls, because people know about our database. We get husband and wives divorcing, that they want to know how many horses their husband have, and they want us to check the database. We don't give this out to just anybody, but they are state records, so they are subject to disclosure if they file a public request for information. And that's where the humane groups have come in. They want to know who's being tested from the kill pins and stuff like that. So it's problematic having this database because, yes, it does have the information on the owners, and being a state, it is subject to disclosure. So we can test the history And I can show you this one because that's my sister. And she has 19 horses in the database. And problems with it is there's no search function, within the last 30 days or the last 6 months. So basically, if you're looking for the last one, it's the one on top. It's the one that was scanned in last. So I did mention that this is dated technology. So it's not perfect, but it's still very effective, very effective. So my own sister had a question about her last Coggins. She was one of those during the flooding that lost 6 horses and 2 mules and 4 horses. She just couldn't get out. The water rose that fast, and she couldn't get out in her trailer. It floods in Louisiana, but she was prepared to leave the next day, but it was too late the next day. So she's already adopted 2 more horses, wanted to know the EIA history. So there it was in our database, and I pulled it up for her. So we can actually, from our document imaging, pull up the actual Coggins test. And one thing we do still require of our veterinarians to put the physical description, because this is problematic on horses going to another state if they don't have a reader. And this actually happened. 2 horses went to an event when traceability went in. I don't know if Arkansas was hiring people to check all the papers coming in, but I got a call from Arkansas. I've got 2 identical paint horses and I don't have a chip reader. What do you do? The veterinarian had not filled it out. I said, give me the name of the vet, and I'll reprimand him for not filling it out better. But again, 2 paint identical horses. He wasn't going to go in and put everything down, but the vet did work it out to where the animals could stay. That was between the show and the vet. But we do still have to get on the vets that they have to put a physical description still. And in this case, no physical description and a tattoo that I really can't read. So in this case, it's kind of hard for this to be functional if you can't really read. And I don't know, maybe that tattoo can be read. But if they don't put the description down, we're still running into problems. And I've even asked our Louisiana labs. Our labs have been told, don't run the test if there's no permanent ID. And they still have to have the description also. So a lot of people get around that. And this was an issue first on if they were using a Texas lab or a Mississippi lab. Did they still have to have the permanent ID? Well, the horse was in Louisiana, but the lab was out of state. Yes, we required that horse in Louisiana to have permanent ID, but it didn't always happen. They would send them to Texas or wherever without the permanent ID. Okay, the early drawbacks, the readers. We didn't have universal readers in those days, so we were using 9-digit readers, and along came the AVID readers that could read the 15-digit chip, and so our initial readers couldn't read. They might recognize that there was a chip there, but they were useless. They couldn't tell us the number. So we shortly realized we had to upgrade, and all those vets that had been given discount readers weren't real happy when they were told that they had to upgrade the readers, and we were no longer doing it at a discount. So we had some issues early on with that, like everybody's still having issues. What type of chip? We mandated testing and permanent ID, gave away chips, but we didn't mandate what type of chip. So at that time, we were not using the ISO chip, the universal chip. So other states didn't accept our microchips, and they refused entry if the owner didn't travel with their own reader. And the racing industry objected to it. So we did work with the racing industry, and we granted them a waiver until they got their permanent tattoo. And this is from Dr. Lee. The reason he granted that waiver was that if you implant a microchip in a racing horse, they don't race as fast. That was the reason. But it quickly became problematic because the horses that didn't make it to the track at 2 years of age to get their tattoo were in some cases sold and maybe didn't have a Coggins test. They just were a black horse. Or in the case of the feral horses outside of Evangeline Downs, they were just turned loose. So we did grant them that exemption, but it has been problematic. It was never meant to be a change of ownership exemption. So when they would go to that yearling sale, I'm exempt, I'm exempt. No, you need to have permanent ID. But no, it was argued that they were exempt until they were 2 years old, until they got their tattoo. So that's the main reason they wanted the exemption. Let the new owners get the microchip or the permanent ID or whatever. So we had some early drawbacks, and we still have some challenges. It's labor intensive to do this, but the rewards are very great. But I just love working for state government. Early on, we had some personnel changes, and this is when the boxes a couple of years back started building up, and I had to find out why. And the girl that had been doing the dedicated scanning had been shifted to receptionist, and in between the phone not reading, she was reported to me she was just surfing the net. So when I asked her why she wasn't still inputting, that's not my job. So I had to go back and rewrite all the civil service job descriptions that you do any job within the office that needs being done. So it's just kind of crazy working for state government. When my background is private practice, if it needs being done, you do it. So anyway, no in-house IT support available, as the creator of our system has retired. He's gone. And so I'm told if something happens to this database, and then we don't know what we're going to do. And I said it was active server pages. There's another page on this database that has our brand check-ins from the stockyards. Well, we've already upgraded that database. We have a electronic brand check-in with Fort Supply Technologies at our market check-ins. So we've upgraded that database. So I actually started reaching out to Dr. Wade and his group about their database, seeing how we could maybe upgrade ours. Keeping up with technology. Again, our technology is dated. It doesn't communicate with anyone, and to have access to ours, it's been problematic during a disaster where they may have hundreds of horses that were rescued or sheltered, and owners may not have their paperwork or their reader or what have you. You can't access our system unless you have access to it, so it doesn't communicate with anything. So I would love some way to search from remotely to get into our database, but I'm told we can't do that. I've gotten some concerns over the mandatory 840 chips, the people that have been microchipping horses with the 900 series for years. Does that mean I'm going to have to go in and rechip? Probably. If it's mandatory 840, you're going to have to. And we did just this year, at our last board meeting, we rescinded the exemption for the racing animals. The Jockey Club's going to make it mandatory with the 2017 foals, so we decided no, it was never meant for a yearling sale, change of ownership. So if we were going to exempt it for the thoroughbreds, we've exempted it for the quarter horses also. So that's not going to be received well because, like I said, a lot of them wanted it for that first sale. But we do have some challenges, but the database has been very successful. And if I can use it, it's very user-friendly. It just, like I said, we've got some issues with inputting the data. But we've had this since the 90s. And we're going to have to look at the cost benefits if we do go to another database because we do use it for specific things, theft, working with law enforcement on a case, and not just horses, but horse supplies. Our brand commission had a theft deterrent program where they were microchipping saddles. And I'm not sure if they're still doing that program or not, but we could even identify stolen saddles by reading the chip in it. So that was very successful. And like I said, I'm not sure. That brand director retired, and I'm not sure if we're still doing it or not. I meant to find out, but I didn't. So anyway, we have some challenges, but overall, I'm very pleased with the database. And our guys don't have a whole lot of downtime, but we've trained everyone, all of our field personnel, that they can input the data fields. They can access the search functions if needed. So during disasters, it's used for theft cases. We work with law enforcement, and we have been very successful. Like I said, it doesn't give us the exact date to hone in, but with our search function, we can find them all, and if we click on it, it actually brings up the image of the Coggins test, and we can get a history of the current owner, the past owner, or the last owner when it was tested. And we're very, very pleased with our program. I wish the database were more current, and I'm looking into it, but a lot of it's going to be how much does it cost.